Hello and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to start out by saying thank you for showing an interest in joining us tonight for our final installment for our Going Organic webinar series. In our first webinar, we covered the history of organics. Then we covered the steps to take to become certified in our previous webinar. In tonight's webinar, we will be focusing on the business planning aspects of running a successful farm, along with what record-keeping techniques are necessary. So last year, FARRMS hosted a series pertaining to organic webinars, mostly within the textbook information, the nitty-gritty details of organic certification. I will be sharing the FARRMS YouTube channel with all of you, so you can kind of take a look at the past webinars. And then also I will be sending you the recording and resources that were mentioned in our first two webinar within the series as well. But since we've already covered the textbook information tonight, we want to hear from the farmers who have been demonstrating best practices when it comes to record keeping and business planning. The goal for tonight's webinar is to share experiences, stories, and possibly pick up some tips and tricks to make the organic certification process simpler for you. Before we get into the introductions, I do have a few acknowledgments. I do encourage you to keep your videos on and your mics muted during the discussion tonight. And just as a disclaimer, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the FARRMS YouTube channel for public and future viewing. So if you do not want to appear in the video, please turn off your cameras. Tonight's webinar is supported by the United States Department of Agriculture, Transition to Organic Partnership Program, the TOPP program, and the Organic Crop Improvement Association, OCIA. So big thanks to these organizations and programs for supporting and allowing us to create educational webinars like this one tonight. All right, with that all being said, let's get into the fun part of tonight. So to kick things off, tonight we will be introducing our farmers that will be joining us for the farmer panel tonight. After we do our introductions, we will move into our prompted questions during this time. If you have any questions that come up, please put them in the chat or save them until the end. We will have some time at the end of each section to kind of do some Q&A with everyone. The first section of the prompted questions, we'll be focusing on the topic of record keeping. After we have answered those questions, we'll take a short break around 7 p.m. And once we come back, we'll finish out the night with talking about business planning. So that is my little introduction for you all. Let's get into it. So we have two professional farmers joining us tonight to share some of their wisdom and knowledge within the topics of office work. It's a subject that we try to do the least amount of work in, but hopefully tonight these farmers can help change your mind and make that office work more enjoyable or at least easier to do. So with that being said, I will let these folks introduce themselves along with their operation. So Jen, if you would like to start us out.
Yes. Hi. Awesome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Hello. It's so great to see everybody tonight. My name is Jen Skoog. I am owner and operator of Family Roots Farm, just outside of Christine, North Dakota, which is halfway between Fargo and Wahpeton. So you blink, you miss it. My farm is, I have an 80-acre farm, 65 tillable, 15 homestead, and I'm actually situated right on the Red River. So close to the Red River that I could chuck a baseball into it if I wanted to. So, which I absolutely love, actually. The nice part is that where I'm at, I'm up high enough elevation wise that I don't typically have to worry about much for flooding. Although I do have some acreage that does get flooded out often when we have high flood springs, but it's typically river bottom treat area anyways. So it's not affecting any of my tillable acreage, which is nice. So I started Family Roots Farm in 2017. So I'm kind of newer, but very quickly getting older. which is crazy to think. And I have a very diverse farming operation that I've been able to develop over the years. The last few years, I've stepped back quite a bit, but now starting this year, especially, I'm kind of ramping back up and bringing back some of the things that I used to do that I had to let go the last few years. So, um, on my 80 acres, my 65 tillable acres are planted into like an alfalfa pasture mix. And mostly alfalfa out there, a little bit of grass mix in with it also. And so all of my feed or all of my forage or my hay and stuff that I use for my animals actually comes straight from the land that I have, which is kind of cool. Along with that, I also have animals, as I've already alluded to. I typically, although not always at once, like right now, I don't have everything, but typically I have chickens for egg and meat, ducks for egg laying purposes, and sheep for meat purposes, and then pigs for meat purposes. And then I have a couple goats that are actually used for fiber. They're Angora goats. And so I have those. And then I also have honeybees on the farm. And so I've got quite a variety of livestock on my farm. And then along with it, I also, apparently I don't have enough on my plate. So I also do quite a bit of produce. Although I've scaled back quite a bit, I've been able to actually figure out some more methods that I can do a little bit more condensed growing and not actually have to use quite as much space and really work on like rotation and succession planting, and then really, focusing on more specific crops that rather than feeling like I have to grow everything. So I do produce, and then since I do produce, I might as well sell those kind of items along with my meat and eggs at farmers markets. But I also do value-added products, and so a lot of my produce is also then made into things like jams, pickles, ferments, things like that that I turn around and sell also. So I've got a fairly wide variety of things on my farm. I should also note too, as we'll talk a little bit, I am a farmer by passion, as I call it, but I'm also an accountant by by necessity. So I am actually an accountant by trade. And so I have a degree in accounting. I've worked in the accounting field for over 25 years. And so that's I've got that background knowledge along with the farming side of things. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jen. Carmen, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
You bet. Certainly will. Jake, Carmen Fernal. I guess I realize I'm about 100 miles about straight south of where Jen lives. I'm not in the Red River Valley. I'm south of the valley, a little town by the name of Madison, Minnesota. And that's where I grew up and then went away for a while and came back. But anyway, I went to college, got a degree teaching English and doing some coaching, and did that for about a half dozen years or so, and then decided to come back and farm. And in 1972, then was able to buy 80 acres of land and begin farming. And over the years, increased that acreage to about 400 acres. It was first certified organic in 1975, if you could call certification organic at that time. But I did work with several organizations then to sort of start writing the rules for organic certification. And of course, we know that eventually this became a national standard. But that was where I actually got my start then. And right from the beginning, wanted to do organic, but obviously was trying to learn how to do it. Depended quite a bit on information from like the Rodale Institute to give us some of the basic standards of organics. But anyway, Got started in 1972 and basically field crop production. Over the years, it's been corn, soybeans, and small grains. And then eventually we incorporated alfalfa. And for about 20 years, I did have a livestock enterprise of farrow to finish hogs. But the hog industry, on the level that I wanted to produce hogs, consolidated so quickly in the 90s and the early 2000s that it became impossible to operate a 60 to 80 sow farrow to finish operation. And so we had to abandon that enterprise. But then we kept working on trying to perfect the rotation of the crops and how we could use the crops to better manage our weeds, to better manage our marketing and the soil fertility. But another piece that has always been and still continues to be a piece of my operation is my collaboration with the University of Minnesota. And many times I was doing collaborative research on the farm, as well as what they were doing on like the St. Paul or the Lamberton campuses. And so over the years, I worked quite a bit with that university. And not to go into detail, but over the last 10 years, we've been really working on developing what we're calling perennial and winter annual crops that the basic idea is continuous living cover on the soils. And one of the biggest, one of the earliest crops that we've developed is a perennial wheat that's called Kernza. And we're just now really starting to get that crop developed. We certainly have a long ways to go before we can allow it to compete, or it would be able to compete with some of the other crops. But I like the value of it because in 2020, I turned the operation over to a neighboring family, and they're calling all the shots, making all the decisions on the farm. I stay connected with them and help where possible. But what that also allowed me to do then is bring in a new livestock enterprise. So in 2020, we started the cow-calf operation. I was able to invest in the breeding stock, and Luke, the young farmer who's doing the work, is doing the heavy lifting for the cattle enterprise. And so it's really beginning to benefit us now because it does allow for even a more diverse rotation across the farm and fertility management as well. And as I speak, we've got 4 calves on the ground right now and probably another dozen or so to come in the next month or so. So that's where we're at with my operation.
That was beautiful. Thank you for both introducing yourselves. It's nice to get to know you both a little bit better before we start diving into the questions. But speaking of, let's get into the farmer panel portion of the night. So my first set of questions, like I mentioned earlier, will pertain to best record-keeping practices for farmers to help you understand what components feed into your business planning practices. This being said, record keeping and office work are typically not the first thing farmers are thinking about unless they understand the importance of record keeping and how it applies to organic certification. So we're not only are we keeping records to stay in compliance with organic certification, but we use these records to analyze the business and to make improvements for the future. So for my first question, we now understand from our last webinar that records and documentation are extremely important for the organic certification process. Organic farmers must keep records of field history, activity, cleaning records, seed records, inputs, production records. So my question, Would you agree that it is within best practices for all farmers to be keeping these types of records? And in your opinion, what records should every farmer be keeping to keep what records should farmers be keeping on a regular basis to help improve their businesses? And Carmen, would you like to kick us off?
I can certainly do that. I guess other than what you've said, I think the two very important reasons to keep records are to keep the banker happy and to keep the inspector happy. Because if you don't have those records, it can become very frustrating if you need to come into the bank and get a loan for whatever reason, because we always know if we're farming, we're going to have to obviously make some major purchases here, there, or whatever. And most of the time, we're not going to have a lot of cash on hand to do that. So we're going to have to definitely keep records. And so when we go to the bank, we want to make sure we have good, reliable records. And then, of course, for the inspector, it's always a challenge because you do get new inspectors every 2 or 3 years, whatever it is. And every inspector takes a different look at your records. Not that they aren't looking for the same things, but they approach them a little bit differently. And so if you can be totally familiar with your records, then the inspector is whatever questions they may ask or whatever information they're looking for, you can readily find it and go right to it. And I guess generally you've mentioned some of the things that we need to keep records on. History tells me that obviously I want record of the seed tags. That's always a big one. I think we should always keep track of field operations, what we did on those fields and the dates that we did those operations. Field names, I think, have a good rationale for the names that you give to fields, because over time, some of those fields may change, but at the same time, when an inspector has an audit request, you can pick out the exact field and all of the operations that were performed on that field. And then, of course, inventory, keeping track of your inventory, what you've harvested, when you've harvested, where it's stored, and what volume of inventory you have. Those would be, I think, some of the best. There are a lot of other things, but those would be the major ones that I find important to keep on hand. And one way that I was able to, over the years, really keep that information at hand was I always tried to carry a little notebook whenever I was doing some work. It didn't have to be a lot of information, but some key information. Because the thing that I came back from is always, if you don't write it down, you won't remember it. And so that little notebook, and when I started farming, we didn't have them, but today you've got a cell phone. So you've got that cell phone with you all the time. So it's easy to keep notes. But those would be some of the areas, Jake, that I would definitely emphasize.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Jen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so Carmen made some great points. And the crazy thing with record keeping is that there are so many records, and I don't think I've ever met someone who regrets keeping too many records. So when in doubt, write it down. When in doubt, keep a record of it, because you just never know when you're going to need it. So for me, and it's funny, Carmen, you mentioned, keeping a notebook with you, or, nowadays we have our cell phones, we can make notes and stuff. Along with the things that Carmen mentioned, I come from the accounting side of things too. And there's so much record keeping on the accounting side of things, not just your receipts, your paperwork and stuff for tax season, but also keeping track of, like your enterprises. And like if you have a receipt that crosses multiple enterprises, being able to break that down and being able to keep track of your income and expenses aspect and have it broken down so that you have a really good view on exactly what's going on. I also, Carmen mentioned, having that notebook with them, or, a phone. And you mentioned that you've already got some little cows on the ground. I am anxiously awaiting lambing season right now. So, which will be kicking off here within the next about 2.5 to 3 weeks. I'll be kicking off on lambing season. And so for me, it's very important that I have my cell phone with me, especially when I'm going out at 2:30 in the morning to check on lambs, or if I've got, my cameras on and one of them's born. So one of the notes that I'm constantly keeping on my end is I'm keeping track of all the information I can about my ewes and what lambs they have, when they have them, what they have, the weights of them, the overall body composition. Were they born strong? Were they born small? Just to kind of have that idea. So all of that information, when I'm going out at 2:30 in the morning, very sleep deprived at that point, and checking on everybody or helping deliver some lambs, being able to take note of those things, because there is no way I'm going to remember that either. So in fact, there's been times I go back and I'm like, I delivered some lambs, right? Like I didn't just dream that. That actually happened. Um, and so then I can keep track of those things and know which ewes are good producers, which ones are producing the bigger lambs. Did they have a singleton? Did they have twins? Did they have triplets? Are they throwing a lot of boys? Are they throwing a lot of girls? Just kind of, and all of that information plays into the general function of the farm too. It's not just, income and expenses. It's looking at like what my stock looks like, what kind of asset are they producing? Are they, am I gonna have let's see, was it last year? No, wasn't last year, it was the year before. Um, I had probably 80% of my lambs that hit the ground were boys. Not a good year. Especially because, I like that more 50-50, because, the boys are typically the ones then that end up going to market or end up going to get processed. And then I want to be able to keep girls behind because my ewes are going to eventually retire, or I need to build up the flock. And so when I have those kind of issues, I'm like, okay, I can actually look back at the last number of years and go, okay, Dorothy, for example, she's number 9. Dorothy, what has she thrown, the last few years, like the last 3, 4 years, and if it's consistently a single boy, which actually has happened the last 3 years with her, but I can't let her go because she's one of my favorites. She's consistently the last 3 years thrown one huge big boy. And I'm like, all right, like I have to start considering, what big changes do I want to make? Is she one that I want to keep around? Is it going to be worth it? And so taking all those into consideration, not just, so record keeping, for me, especially the lambs, the other one are right now eggs. I am my egg producer, so I've got gold coming out of my coops right now. And so it's tracking, how many eggs are coming in typically a day, and tracking how many are coming in, because I can start seeing fluctuations, and I can see, are they ramping up? Are they ramping down? I'm starting to, forecast a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting 90 a day, here we go. And it's like, if I can start to see it taper off very slowly, then I know, hey, I got to start adjusting things going forward. Um, so yeah, when it comes to livestock, are a big one, that I definitely keep a lot of records on my farm with.
Excellent. Thank you. So as we have kind of touched on tonight, there are a lot of different records that that we as farmers must keep track of for certification purposes and for business purposes. During the peak of the season, let's say August, because that's always the worst month and most of our lives, but it can be difficult to keep track of everything and make sure that we're still completing all of our tasks that need to be done. How do you keep your records organized and easily accessible, and especially readable? Because paper doesn't always work very well with water and dirt, and that's kind of what our farm runs on. So how are you keeping these records organized, and how are you making sure that they're usable during your business planning phases? So Jet, would you like to go for it?
Yeah, so I will be upfront and honest and very open about this. Especially like once I hit August, I have no organization. It is a pile on my desk at that point, or um, in my office I've got like a three drawer system, so like any receipts and stuff that come in, I've got drawers that they need to go into. Usually at least early on in the season, especially the winter months, early on in the season, I'm really good about staying on top of my records, making sure that receipts are getting inputted into the database, making sure information is being put into Excel as I use it, as the lambs are born, it's once I've recovered and got at least a couple hours of sleep, try to get logged onto the computer and get things entered in right away. But we all know, I mean, summer months, whether you have livestock or produce or what it is that you choose, I mean, it gets to be a lot. And so I try really, really hard to stay on top of it. But I'm gonna be honest. It's a hot mess. The good news is that 99% of the time, it at least makes it to my office. And now I just moved into I just built a house and moved into my house like 2 months ago. And so now I actually have a dedicated office that's all it's for, is it's actually an office. It's not office slash bedroom, office slash living room, or kids dumping grounds or anything like that. It's just my office. So at least then I know that if something lands on my desk here, it's going to stay there until I can get it addressed. Um, but sometimes, on a rainy day, if I'm really feeling up to it, it's like, all right, maybe I should start plowing through some of this stuff. But I'm usually pretty good about, especially once the peak of the season, once I can get through the peak of the season, then it's like, all right, we got to start tackling this right away. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add something to the previous question. One thing we have nowadays that we didn't have when I started was I mentioned the cell phone, but we can take pictures. And I think we need to take much more advantage of that picture taking. I watch Luke, and he's taking pictures all the time, and that certainly makes a sense today. But I think what Jen said, a dedicated place for an office is critical. I don't care where you have it, but it's sort of off limits to everybody else because you know where you put things, and that's critical. When I was in the heart of doing all this, doing the farming myself, a lot of times I would have slips of paper, and the one thing that I definitely did was make sure that those slips of paper got placed right on my desk. So when I came in and sat down at that desk, there they were. And so I made sure that I had that. The other thing is that as computers came on and software and things came on, I think a major office piece of equipment that has really made record keeping easy for me is a good quality scanner. Absolutely, because if you can scan the document, then you don't have to go looking for the paper when the inspector is here. Because if you set up your files on your computer appropriately, the inspector can ask you about something. If you go to your files on the computer, there it is. And what's better is if he wants a copy of it, push print and you can give him a copy or her a copy. And so I think you can get a really good scanner that scans directly into your computer for like $300, $400, even up to $500. But don't skimp on a scanner. It will save a lot of headaches because I'll scan everything: seed tags, invoices, bills of lading, you name it, field maps, everything like that gets scanned in so that I know I've got a copy of it. And then I know that slip of paper isn't going to be put someplace and I can't find it. So to me, that would be definitely one of the primary things. And we'll talk about software a little bit later, and then I can go into a little bit more detail on the type of software that I use that was really, really excellent.
Excellent. that scanner advice is brilliant. I've never thought of it like that. So that is a great idea. I have, however, I use this app. I used it quite a bit when I was in school. Is where you can take a picture of a document and convert it to a PDF. And I use that quite a bit throughout different reasons and different things. So that is something that I will definitely start applying to the farm more because I think that's pretty smart. So I've got a question that follows well after my last. We as farmers are out in the field. We're in the wash pack. We're in the yard. We're going to market. We're during all these activities, we're supposed to be keeping track of our data and filling out our records. Like mentioned before, this task can be overwhelming, especially during the busiest part of the season. So with this being said, how have you developed habits or standardized your workflows within your operations to ensure that you and your team are both effectively keeping track of necessary records? And Carmen, would you like to start us out?
Yeah, it's always been a one person operation, so I was the team. So well, I depended on myself to make sure these things were happening. And towards the end of my active direct involvement, I was getting engaged with all the technology that's currently available on equipment like tractors and things of that sort. And then the record keeping that's automatically tracked in that auto steer monitor and everything. And so it was fairly easy and almost by default that what I was doing as an operation in the field would be put into the tractor GPS system. Because I came into a field, I had to have the name of the field. I had to have the operation that was there. The date was automatically there, and everything was automatically there. And then when I did get home, I could upload that information right into my computer. And so that was almost an automatic default routine that could happen. And if I didn't get it uploaded that day, I know I still had it, and it would be then eventually uploaded in the computer and then come together with all of the documents that I may have scanned previously, and it all already came together quite easily. So that was it. In the earlier days, I was hoping that I was get everything done routinely. There were some glitches, but I think what taught me early to get some routine was when the inspector came and started asking the questions. Where is this? What did you do here? And so it really forced me to get this routine. And it really started then with having that notepad and writing things down, and then making sure that information got put on my desk and then entered for future use.
That's perfect. I know another farmer that I was chatting to not too long ago, a larger operation, tractor based, multi people working on the farm. And what they do is they keep clipboards in all of their tractor cabs. And then that way, who's ever jumping in the cab, they take the records, and then either at the end of the season or at the end of the month, they go through and they replace all the sheets and enter in the data. So something like that can definitely be implemented on a larger scale as well. But Jen, would you like to add anything to this question?
Yeah, so I'm a one-woman show. It's really just me. Maybe on occasion I can pawn one of my teenagers to hop in and help, but it's rare, especially now that they're getting older. Um, but so I mean, a lot of the record keeping, I mean, it's all on me. And so it's as long as I can keep myself efficient and as long as I can keep myself on task, which helps. Um, Having my phone, having like a notes app on my phone has helped immensely, rather than because I know I always have that with me. And so that allows me to be a little bit more efficient with my time, especially when I have to take records, things like that. One of the areas that I do have some help with on occasion is when I go to farmers markets. And thankfully, my kids have done enough farmers markets with me that they know the gist, they know how it rolls, you know. And, although it's getting harder and harder to convince them to come with and help, sometimes I can, which is nice because I mean it gets to be a long day. And if I have to run to the bathroom, you know, grab something to eat, you know, whatever it is, it's really nice to have someone there to help cover. And so one of the things that I put into place specifically for farmers markets was a spreadsheet that I can print off, and it's already, you know, pre-filled out of just all the different products that I would have offered at farmers market, along with prices, things like that, and then a box where we can actually mark as they're being sold. So one of the things that I tried to do is because I use Square for my sales platform. However, I only use it when I'm using credit card. I don't enter in all of our cash sales because it gets to be a little cumbersome, and especially at like opening bell when I've got, you know, a bunch of people that are all looking for eggs and they're throwing cash at you and they just want their stuff so they can get going. It was a lot easier to be able to keep track of what we're starting with. And so like on that spreadsheet, we're marking um, you know, meat as we sell it, because I have just a big freezer that I bring with, but like how many eggs do we start with? You know, how many produce, you know, like how many jars of stuff, you know, just kind of keeping track. And so that as we're selling throughout the day, then at the end of the day, we do a final count. And so that's something easy enough that anybody that happens to be with me that day and helping out, it's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy for them to go ahead and fill that out. And then if I step away, at least I know things are being tracked in a manner that at the end of the day, all I have to do is do some counting, cross-check with the cash that I've got on hand and the credit card receipts that come through. And, you know, majority of the time we get pretty close. Every so often I'll actually, you know, be on the dot, but there's usually a dollar or two missing here and there. Um, but it's been really helpful to at least have a very systematic process specifically for like the farmers market, which helps a lot. I've had interns in the past that have come and helped, and you know, so it's kind of that one standard process, which helps immensely. Um, I do know that eventually I'm gonna have to give in a little bit and probably have more standard processes on the farm. Um, because I can see myself down the road probably needing, you know, a part-time employee throughout the summer months. We do, you know, and I've had interns in the past, you know, we've had some processes, but they're not necessarily written down ones. And so being able to have like some SOPs and things like that for certain processes would be great. If you guys don't know what an SOP is, standard operating procedure, which in a prior life, when I worked at a big corporation in town, I was like the queen of writing SOPs. So I have a great format and everything. And as tedious as they can be, the nice part is that once one thing is written like that, it's like, you know, then you're good. Like you just have to update it. You don't have to go through the big process of updating, of rewriting it and stuff every time. But yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you. Yeah, SOPs are a great thing to kind of talk about, especially when we're talking about record keeping, because it really does help, especially when we have not only just for ourselves, because in the 6 months of winter, we can definitely forget a few things over that time. But if we ever do have employees come in or just family members or a neighbor that comes over to help for an afternoon, whatever the case may be, it's a lot easier for us as the business owner to be able to effectively communicate if we've already gone through that nitty gritty process of writing out the SOP. So one, it's for us as the owners to kind of understand what's all the little details, and then we can express all of that information to the employees that were coming out to our farms. But we've talked a lot about the importance of record keeping in tonight's webinar, and I'm sure this isn't the first time that you've heard this statement that record keeping is very important. People talk about the importance of record keeping all the time, but most of the time we hear it from professors who aren't actually in the field on a daily basis. Not always the case, but it happens a lot. So I just wanted to ask you guys, what have been some of the benefits of your farm improvements that you've experienced through effective record keeping techniques on your farm? So Jen, would you like to start us out with this one?
Yeah, I would say it has saved my tail more than a time or two. Um, so I can think of, one of the big vital ones is when I'm doing breeding. I'm very meticulous on making sure that I don't even have father-daughter breeding. And so being able to keep track of which lambs are coming from which moms, and even going as far as I have color coding, I have markings, things like that. And being able to record keep and keep track of those things then allows me to be able to know which ewe lambs I can keep back and then can continue to breed with another ram. Just very meticulous on making sure that the ones I'm keeping are good and I know which ones came from which. That has helped a number of times. Um, Another one, the financial record keeping aspect of things is I don't know how many times I have gone back and I have pulled up prior tax returns because in my big envelope that has my tax return in it for prior years, I've got all of my supporting documentation, got all my receipts, and I don't know how many times I've gone back and go, what was the breakout on that? I don't have it in my program, or just curious, like how much was it, per pound or per bag or being able to look back at those things. And so that has been great. And then also when it comes to produce, because I'm some days I'm still wrapping my head around produce, but it's nice to know it's like, what did I sell that for previous years? How much did I sell a pint of potato or tomatoes? Or how many plants did I actually plant of beans? How many seeds did I use? How many plants did I plant of tomatoes? How many, and I can look back at yields, especially when I'm planning out my years. So like now this year, I just got my grow tent set up yesterday and feel like I'm a little behind the ball, but I'm not bad. I'm like, hopefully this next week I can get some more seeds started. But I'm all of a sudden going, oh my gosh, I haven't done this in a few years. How many do I start? How many do I grow? And especially if you've taken time away from something and then going back to it. I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, let alone how many tomato plants I started 4 years ago. So things like that, being able to help plan, uh, when you're doing, we're going to talk about business planning, I mean, that's another big aspect is it's like pulling all this information and having all this record keeping, you can look back at it and go, okay, now I can finally make an informed decision that's going to affect the overall business.
Absolutely. Thank you. Carmen, would you like to add anything to that one?
Yeah, I guess the adage that I would apply to this is if you don't know where you're going, how do you know how do you know you're there when you're there? So, I mean, that's the obvious answer, but I think there's a couple of things. And my record keeping is obviously a lot different than Jen's because of our enterprises. I mean, I wouldn't trade my record keeping needs for Jen's ever. I mean, I can't imagine the complexity of it, and it sounds like you're doing a good job on it. So keep it going. But row crop cultivating was a big part of my weed management on the farm. And when you row crop cultivate in an organic system, you obviously want to get out there as quickly as you can because the crop is very small. But if you don't get it early, you're going to have the weed issue all the rest of the season. So I would spend hours on a tractor row crop cultivating. And I didn't have a windshield because I had an open cab, but I would call it windshield time because the thoughts and ideas that were going through my head as I was going down that field and seeing virtually every square foot of those fields, I could start seeing differentiations in the weed pressure, in the crop itself, the terrain of the land, how it impacted everything. But those thoughts would be put down on my notepad. And very critical thoughts. And they would start translating into equipment. that could deal with these differentiations. And so those notes then would go into my note keeping when I got into the office and entered them. And then in the winter time, when I was going through these notes, I'd actually say, you mean that's what I was thinking of out there in the field in the middle of June, and it was all this work going on? And all of a sudden I'd realize, okay, so this is what I was thinking. This is what I have to start looking at then. And to give you an example, I only operated maximum of 400 acres myself, but over time I began to understand the ecology or the nature of weeds in row crops, when they germinate, how fast they germinate, etc. And I did this observing, and I might just do a sidebar here. One of the other pieces of equipment that I bought that was very, very beneficial was a four-wheel ATV, because at least 2 to 3 times a week, I would jump on that four-wheeler and go out and look at the crops and take notes of what was going on in those fields, translating that back as well. And I always like to say, I would put 400 to 500 miles on that four-wheeler and never get more than 4 miles from home. So it told you how much I was out there looking. And the other thing was I was down there close to the crop. I wasn't sitting in the pickup cab looking over the field. So really close observation. And then obviously making records based on those observations, or notes based on those observations. And then come the wintertime, so what do we need? And so the one thing that I learned is that the later I could plant my corn and soybeans, the better weed management I would get. And so one thing I did is I invested in a $300 soil thermometer and found out what the soil temperatures were, kept track of that, and realized that where I live, I don't plant corn before the 20th of May, because that's when I'm going to get ahead of the weeds. Well, then what it also said is, if I got to wait that late, I got to get it planted in time. So what I did is, because of those notes, because of the observations, I bought a 12-row corn planter instead of a 6-row corn planter, because it opened up the window of planting for me and enhanced my weed management. But I use that only as an example of the benefits of record keeping and note taking, because it definitely impacts all the things that we did. It impacted on any number of pieces of equipment that I bought over the years. But that's how I would really say, yes, record keeping can really enhance your operation. And I say it again, you sit down in your office in the middle of January and it's 20 below out there, and you're reading through these notes, and you can't believe that that's what you were thinking back there in June, but it makes all the sense. And if you hadn't written it down, you would not be remembering it today. So really, really, really important practice.
Absolutely. Observation is a very big one. That's something that I learned from my grandpa, because we would always drive around the fields. It was all within like a 15 square miles. So we'd drive around, check it out, see what's going on. It was a conventional farm, but it's still a practice that we, as all farmers, hold close to our hearts. And another thing I wanted to add is how beneficial a crop journal, a crop variety journal has been for me. Especially when you're in like the vegetables or within the fruit selling business, you can get up to quite a few different varieties of crops. I think last year we had about 250. This year we've cut it down to about 200, and that's including all the vegetables and all the fruits and everything that we do. But keeping track of all those different varieties is a nightmare. And there's one tomato plant. We've all seen Johnny's seed catalog. One tomato, you can have about 150 different varieties. So, like, what's the right one for me? So I've really come to the conclusion of just keeping a document, a Google Doc on my phone that I just pull up when I'm out in the field. Every 10 minutes in the morning, I'm walking the field just to make sure everything's good, everything's okay, and I'll notice things and I'll put that in. And then typically what I'll do is it's like, oh, this is Anaheim peppers. So that's how I start the sentence, and then I write whatever comment it is. And then January comes around. I'm not doing much. We're just kind of hanging out on the computers, anyways. That's when I can kind of go back and kind of look at those notes. And I am shocked at some of the notes that I make. And it's just like, this has to be wrong. But I've questioned myself before in the past, and I got bit in the butt the next year when I didn't do what I said I was supposed to do. So that's another thing that I just wanted to throw in there is listen to your notes. You wrote them that way for a specific reason. Listen to your past self. So, I always like to ask the question, mainly because I think it is important to share resources with each other. And there are thousands of resources out there to help farmers. Half the battle is finding these resources, and then the other half is seeing if these resources are actually useful for your learning style and for your context. So my question for you both are you aware of any softwares, templates, organizations that offer some guidance resources to farmers looking for help within the record keeping topic? So, Carmen, would you like to share?
Yes. There's two pieces of software that I really latched onto. One of them is called COG Pro, COG-PRO. And it will keep track of everything for you if you let it. It's just a matter of utilizing it. And I think the web page is just cog-pro.com. And they've got a model that you can just play with to get an idea. But it will keep track of everything, including your inventory, if you enter it correctly. And it will automatically deplete that inventory based on the documentation that you put in for sales and everything else. And it's got memos, so you can put notes in there. You can upload files to put into a specific field for a specific practice. And I know my inspector loved it because we could do an audit and I could just pull it up and we'd have everything right at our fingertips. I know they don't advertise much, but I went to the website and it looks like it's still current. So that would be one piece of software. The other piece that I started with before it was even software was FinPac from the University of Minnesota, Center for Farm Financial Planning. And when I started farming, it was the Minnesota Farm Records book, and everything would be hand entered into that book. And eventually then they turned it into a software program, and it probably doesn't keep track of some of the things that you would need for organic inspections, but you coordinate it with. In my case, I coordinated it with CogPro. But the thing that I liked about FinPac is it kept a good record and report card on my financial health and my investments, my debt load, the values, the up and down flows, which enterprises were making money, which enterprises were not making money. And then once a year, the later years, we would go to Lamberton, and they would then go over all these general records, but then you would get a full readout of your own operation. And now you can either get the private individual software, I can't tell you what it costs now, or you can work with an adult farm business manager and work in a group, but I really liked it because it really helped me keep track of what was going on that farm financially, yield-wise, and historically. It kept historical records, which you could see from year to year where things were going up or down, or what was or wasn't working, and you could see your costs. Your investment costs, were they beneficial costs or not? One thing I would say is that a lot of times what looked like negative numbers to the general public were actually positive numbers for me because of the organic system, and a lot of times what I call the non-cash benefits that I might be receiving by using a more robust rotation, different crops, all of these types of things. But the fact of the matter is, it also told me where I was and what things I needed to be paying more attention to, and some things I needed to change. But those would be the two pieces of software that I really depended on over the years.
That is great. I've never heard of Pod Pro, so that is definitely something that I'm gonna nerd out tonight on and kind of take a look. There is one thing I wanted to mention to everybody is most of these softwares don't do everything that we want it to do, unfortunately. So don't be afraid to kind of stack some of these softwares together to kind of help you improve your operations. And kind of do that analysis for yourself to see if those softwares are worth it for you and your operation. Is the time saved going to be worth the price that it costs those softwares? But that's my little tangent. Jen, do you have any resources or any things that you would like to share?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that, Jake, because I have struggled finding a software program to do everything that I need it to do because I have such a wide variety of enterprises. So I will start though, for the financial side of things, I'm a die-hard when it comes to QuickBooks. I've been using QuickBooks for more than 25 years, and I'm a die-hard with it when it comes to that. So I've got it worked out so that I use the classes in there for my different enterprises, so I can run reports based on my enterprises. So it'll give me a good snapshot of where I'm at, my income and expenses and stuff related to each specific enterprise that I have on the farm, which is really handy. So I'm a diehard when it comes to that, and it works out great for me because I'm small enough that, and I don't have to worry about payroll, which QuickBooks does offer payroll and know how to do it in there, but it's a really, really good user-friendly program that I use there for the financial side of things. So for the record, more of your record keeping of the non-financials, I have yet to find a program that does everything I wanted to do. And to do everything that I want to do would mean stacking like at least 3 different programs, and I just don't have the mind or patience to do that. So lucky for me, I am a complete nerd when it comes to Excel. In a prior life, I worked at a big corporation up in Fargo, and 99% of my job was in Excel. And so I learned really fast how to do all all the fun Excel things, building tables and macros, and I can usually whip out a pretty impressive Excel form when needed. And I'm probably guilty of spending way too much time developing the form for what it's actually being used for. So since I've struggled finding what I want and what I need, is I've gotten to the point where I just create my own stuff in Excel. Even down to some of the financial stuff is done in Excel because it's not presenting the way I want it to in QuickBooks. And so I'll build things up in Excel and make it do what I want there. I haven't quite gotten as good as you, Jake, about the whole what is it, Excel like on your phone? It's Sheets or
Yeah,
what is it?
Google. I have the Google Drive app
Google.
that you can
Okay,
pull up
yeah.
docs and sheets and all of it.
I probably could, but If you guys saw my setup right now, I have 3 screens. And they're the big screen monitors for my computer. So it's like when I sit at my desk, it's like I can have these huge Excel spreadsheets and stuff in front of me, and I can have more than one up at a time. And I need that full big visual aspect of it when I'm entering things in. So I'm big on note keeping, like on my phone or on paper or something, and then bringing it into the office and then really laying it out. So um, my go-to every time though is going to be Excel because I can make it do what I want it to do rather than it adapts to me instead of me trying to adapt to it.
Absolutely.
I just might want to add one thing there with FinPack. Every year my banker would ask for a financial statement. The last 2 pages of FinPack, I could print them off and hand them to him, and he was happy. So that was another benefit. I just wanted to mention that for FinPack.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. We're running in just a short on time, but that's perfectly okay. We're having good conversation. But I would like to mention to you all that all of the resources mentioned in tonight's webinar will be sent to you in a recap email later this week. Included in this recap email will also be some more record keeping techniques and business planning techniques, other resources that we at FARRMS have found, and we'll be able to share that information with you. So if you miss anything tonight, don't stress out. You will get the recording in this recap email, all of the resources for this webinar, including all of the resources and webinar recordings for our past 2 Going Organic webinar that we had earlier this month. But we are 7:02, so let's take a little short break. Let's take a 10-minute break, get up, stretch your legs, grab some water, grab a snack, and we'll meet back here at 7:12 and we'll get started again. So I will see you again very soon. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you are feeling refreshed and ready for the second half of this webinar. Now, I want to focus on the topic of business planning. This topic in itself can be very overwhelming just because of the amount of materials that can feed into your planning process. I know I have had feelings of overwhelm when I first started business planning for my farm, but now after learning more about the subject and listening to experts talk about their tips and tricks, it's become a lot easier to understand. Hopefully after tonight, you'll be able to pick up a few tips and tricks of your own that will help you through the planning process as you go through it as well. So for my questions, at the beginning of any business, you have to sit down and work out a plan. This is no exception for farmers. We as business owners have to assess and work on our business plan on a regular basis to ensure that we can make a living off of this business. So my question for you guys, what records have you found most helpful during your business planning process? And Jen, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so immediately I think back to when I first was starting out in 2017 with a wild dream and not 2 cents in my pocket to do it with. So I think about, the things and the resources and what I needed to get it up off the ground. And for me, it was kind of tough. It was really tough at first because everything that I wanted to do. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. My apologies.
No, you're okay. No worries.
Nope, I'm back. I completely forgot to shut the door, and I've got kids and dogs and going in and out. I'm like, nope, nope. So I think back to like when I first started, and everything that I wanted to do, there's not a lot of data out there. There's getting to be more and more when you think of, small scale produce, small scale livestock. Thankfully, at least on the livestock side of things, I've got a little bit more data to work with out there. Although it's, usually on the larger scale, but on the smaller scale, it's really tough to come up with a lot of good, solid data. And so at that point in time, I relied on getting information from other people I knew. And so getting to know other local farmers, getting to know other produce producers, and hopefully, they're nice enough to share some data with me, or at least give me some possible resources or places to look when it came to just trying to get some data put together to even make sure that what I wanted to do was even feasible. If it's even something that I could do and that I could actually make it work. And so that piece of things, getting that whole started, I want to say it was probably the most difficult when it came to data collection, to resources, records, things like that, because I was literally starting from scratch and I did not have a whole lot of anything to work with. Now, over the years, I've got my own records I can look at. I can look back at what I've gotten, what I've done in the past. I've made more connections now, which has been great. I've gotten to know other local producers and some really nice ones that are willing to share some data and information with me, which is helpful. And there's getting to be, I'm learning a little bit more about the resources out there too. Different organizations that I can work with or connect with that can either direct me to other areas for information or not, or direct me to other people that maybe have information, things like that. So definitely, in that very beginning, it was the connections piece. It was making connections with people, just because that data was just, there wasn't a whole lot out there to really work with to get started.
I very much ran into that problem too when I first started farming. There's just really not much information, and where I am in the world, it's surrounded by conventional ag. There's not very many produce operations around me. What I found really helpful is just kind of starting at a small scale at first and start gathering some of that data before you start launching it out to a large scale. I think for the first 2 years of production, we were very small and we were just data collecting, just so we could analyze the business, what crops are doing the best, what doesn't work. And then let's start pushing up to the acre scale and things like that with the products that we know that work. So sometimes this data collection can just take time. And that's kind of the tough part, but that was a great point to bring up. But Carmen, do you have anything that you would like to share?
Yes. Back in 1972, business plan, what's that? Absolutely. I went to town one morning in February of 1972. I went downtown Madison in February 1st of 1972 and met this guy and bought a farm. Literally. And nobody, I wasn't even thinking farm plan. I wasn't even thinking business plan. I wanted to farm. And, the rest is history, as they say. But what really helped me probably were two things. I knew a farmer who was connected very closely to the ag department at the local high school, and they wanted to start an adult farm business class in Madison and asked me if I was interested, and I said, by all means, I was interested. I think part of it was that I had a college degree, and I knew that information was everything. The more information, the better you are. And so I got involved with that farm business management class, and then started keeping the Minnesota Farm Account Book, and just kept track of the things that I was doing on the farm. And then once a year, the adult farm business person would make monthly visits to the farm so that we could keep track of at least what was going on. The challenge I eventually ran into was that he was very conventionally oriented. And so really, in part, I was sort of educating him on what an organic business plan would look like. And we communicated very well. It's just that we did have those differences, because I every once in a while when we close the books each year, he'd be looking, he says, where is your chemical expense here? Where is your fertilizer expense here? And so I had to explain some of these things to him, but the farm business management was critical for what I would say was my success over the years, because I learned a lot of things. One thing I wasn't even aware of, especially in field crops where you have big equipment expenses, the whole concept of depreciation, of tax planning. I really only learned a lot of that by working with this adult farm management class, because I was an English major. I wasn't a numbers person. And so that was, even though I grew up on a farm, but business plans weren't really emphasized back then. So that was really one of the most critical things, because then I could start keeping track from year to year, what was working, where I should be looking at, what I should be doing, etc. The other piece that was probably even more critical to me, because I was doing organic, was that I was able to connect with some farmers just south of me, down near the Marshall area, who at that time were my age today. And so here I was 25, 26-year-old talking to 65 and 70-year-olds who were seeing how agriculture was moving away from what I called default organics to the conventional, more dependence on commercial fertilizers and chemicals. And they had opted not to follow that track. And so they became my mentors when it was the whole concept or idea of organic. So how do we do it? What are some of the things that we can do? Where are the markets? All of those pieces. So those would be the two pieces that really helped me eventually form the business plan that allowed me to then move forward on enterprises that became part of the farm over the years.
That's awesome. And since you brought up the farm business management course, I would also like to plug that FARRMS has a 3-month program called Farm Beginnings from the months of January to March. Very similar to the program. During the course of the program, students will create and or update their whole farm plan or business plans, for simpler terms. Each week we cover different topics pertaining to the business plan, topics like financial planning, record keeping, budgeting, food safety, just to name a few. So a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight, we cover in this class as well. So if you're looking for somewhere to start on your business planning, or just to kind of help you get through some of the process or ask some questions to somebody, feel free to reach out to myself or anybody on the farm staff. We are always happy to help out. And business planning is something that I very much enjoy, because I am the facilitator of that Farm Beginnings class. So business planning is something that I hold close to my heart. But moving on to our next question. So when you first start up your business, typically you're working on your plan on a fairly regular basis in comparison, to make sure that your plan is accurate and represents your business in its current form. As your business grows and becomes more established, updating your business plan becomes much less time consuming and on a much less regular basis in comparison. I know farmers that do all of their business planning in January, and that's how they plan, and that's what they stick to. There's other farmers that are updating their plans on a monthly basis to change for different marketing factors and different things. It just depends on what operation that you want to run and how much time you want to invest into all this planning. So my question for the panel is, how often do you sit down? How often did you or do you sit down now to work on your business plan? And how do you ensure that the planning aspects of your business are being completed in a timely manner? So Carmen, would you like to start?
Sure. As you know, I'm not making all major decisions anymore, so obviously doesn't apply to me now. But back in the day, I was always the sole operator, sole proprietor. So I had to make my decisions. But there are a couple people, obviously I would visit with my spouse, with my wife, and we talk about the operation, what we saw. My wife never very directly involved in the day-to-day operation because she had a job off the farm, and I was focused a lot on raising the kids when they were smaller, but very critical to the operation, no doubt, because there were a few years when she kept us viable. And so those things are certainly important. So we would definitely talk about it. I think another person that eventually, and after a very few years, became critical to me was a marketer. What I learned early on was that I was a poor marketer when it came to organic. And the reason I say that is because corn, soybeans, small grains, you don't just, as an organic, you don't load them up and take them down to the local elevator. Those markets are 50, 100, 200 miles away. And so it required time finding those markets. And so very early on, I became very dependent on a marketer to help me market. And so I would really lean on that marketer every year and ask him, in this case, what should I be looking at for the coming growing season? What are the crops that look like they're going to be ones that I should be focusing on? Obviously, corn and soybeans are generally, the cash cows, but in an organic rotation, you want a more robust rotation. So you're always going to have third or fourth crops. And so what should they be? And a best case in point, in one of the last years that I was farming, I wanted to try dried field peas. So the first thing I did is I talked to my marketer and I said, if I can grow the peas, can you get them marketed for me? And we knew what basically the revenue potential would be. And so he assured me that, yes, we can get those marketed for you. Long story short, a month after I had the peas in the bin, they were marketed. And I did do nothing about it. He did all the work. But that, when it comes to really that business planning part, my marketer became very critical. The other person that I did spend some time with would be the equipment people at the local, in this case, the local John Deere store. How can this piece of equipment benefit my whole operation? How does it fit into me becoming a better corn, soybean, small grain grower, whatever the case may be? And would its investment pay off in those kinds of terms? And understanding what the equipment could do, understanding the costs, all of these things. So the equipment expertise was always definitely a part of it as well. So those would be the areas that really I would go to, the people I would go to really start planning each year on where it would be. And then one final thing, each year, especially in organics, each year is different because it's not reading the labels, following directions. It's watching the weather from day to day to day, which can impact your whole business plan in a matter of hours. And so having that flexibility in that business plan was also very critical.
I think you brought up a very important point with working with other people. We as farmers, we're supposed to be knowledgeable within all of these different subjects, whether it's equipment, whether it's harvesting, wash pack, food safety. We got to know this all. It's not physically possible unless you're an absolute genius, and that is very rare. So don't be afraid to ask questions to other people. Go to those experts and kind of ask some of those questions. In my opinion, there are no dumb questions. Truly, just ask them. Most people are not going to be upset by asking a question. Most people are getting paid to answer your questions, so feel free to ask them. But yes, that was a great point. Thank you, Carmen. Jen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Okay. First off, I have two little semi non-related things. One, Jake, you brought up the Farm Beginnings course. Proud Farm Beginnings graduate right here. Because of Farm Beginnings, I have my farm. Because it gave me all of the resources that I needed to actually figure out what the heck I was doing and put this dream into reality. So, and then Carmen, you had mentioned south of you was Marshall, and you were working with people down there, and it just all of a sudden dawned on me. I was born and raised in Tracy. Which
And
is the dinky little town that like most people are like, what? Where is that? I'm like, it's
and
south
that
of Marshall yet. You sneeze, you miss it.
that's where those people were centered around Tracy. We'd meet about 3, 4 times a year in that Tracy area.
Oh, but
Absolutely.
that's crazy. So I still have uncles that farm down there.
There you go.
I've got uncles and cousins that still farm down in the Tracy area. So
Yeah,
a couple of them are a little closer to Amaret, and then like there's Tracy, and yeah,
yeah.
so crazy.
Nice.
So as far as business planning and how often and stuff, I would say, I mean, minimum once a year, I sit down and look at my whole farm plan. But different enterprises on the farm require different attention. So, like some things, for example, maybe only once or twice a year. But there's also like livestock, for example. I'm already planning for 2026. It's like I haven't even hit 2025 yet. It's like I'm already looking a year and a half, close to 2 years in advance, figuring out, well, where do I want to be in 2026? What do I want to look like when I'm going into 2027? Simply because, when it comes to livestock, it's not quite as easy as ordering the package of seeds and throwing them in some soil, and then, making sure you have space for it. I'm having to pre-plan and figure out herd size. Like ram, for example, he's one that I have a ram that I may have to consider slowly starting to phase out here in the next year or two, heaven forbid if as long as nothing traumatic happens. But just kind of thinking ahead about those kind of things. So like so yeah, there different enterprises on the farm require different planning at different times. Some are a little bit more frequent. Like last spring, for example, when I finally made it through lambing season, it was hands down my absolute worst lambing season ever. I lost ewes, I lost lambs, I dealt with medical emergencies that I've only ever read about, I've only ever heard about, I've never experienced, and I had like three of them thrown at me within a few days. And so it was like the perfect storm of everything that could go wrong went wrong. Which was a great learning experience. It frazzled my nerves and made me contemplate more than once if I still wanted to keep doing this. But because of what came about, I immediately, like right then and there at 2:30 in the morning, I was like, I need to start contemplating, I need to start reevaluating what this year is going to start looking like. Because if I'm losing ewes, if I'm losing lambs, if this happened and that happened, or like when I'm throwing a whole bunch of boys and like two girls, things change really rapidly. So it's the flexibility, like Carmen, you mentioned already, JQ too, like it's that flexibility aspect. Like you just, when it comes to certain things, you just kind of have to roll with the punches. And yeah, start making some changes as that happens.
I just might have went. What has really helped a lot, though, in organics is that we can now get crop insurance, at least for field crops, which takes a little bit of risk out of it because I've used it a couple of times when the weather didn't cooperate. So definitely look at that to help stabilize your business plan for sure.
Absolutely. Multiple insurance opportunities and options out there. You just got to do a little bit of research and figure out what plans are going to work best within your operation. But yes, that is a great point to bring up. We have mentioned tonight that you're kind of both two solo operators on your farm. I was until last year, until I convinced my brother to move up here and start growing with me. But regardless of the size of the operation, we're always going to have to communicate our plans and desires with other people, whether that be employees, significant others, TA providers, bankers. How have you determined who is going to be a part of your planning team for the farm, and how do you effectively communicate these plans and these decisions out to the rest of the farm? and the members that you're working with. So Jen, would you like to start?
Yeah, so you mentioned, the solo. I'm currently a solo operator, but I also have experience on the other side of things too. And so I used to be part of a married couple that owned a conventional farm. And so I wasn't by myself then. I was part of that planning team. And so I got to see what it was like to be part of a team who worked with bankers, who worked with your agronomist, was one that we worked with common our insurance agent, when we were dealing with multi-peril, things like that. It was also a family farm, and so we had another family member, my ex-husband's father-in-law or father, sorry, my father-in-law, was also still involved there too. And so we had, this big group, and it was, I felt like it was a little bit easier when there's more people. But on the flip side of things, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen. We all know what happens there some days. Because then we were running into conflict, and his dad wanted to do it one way, he wanted to do another way, and I'm back here going, "You're both wrong. It should be done this way." And so I got to experience that. I got to see that side of things and be involved in a much larger operation. We had almost 1,600 acres that we did. And so it was a lot, and it was a lot of planning. It was a lot of, working with different people and figuring things. I mean, even down to the seed sales guy, just working with them and, well, so-and-so said this and bringing it back to them. And so it's like, it almost felt like a web in a sense of, dependent on what one person said, then you got to work with another person and change things. And so it was really interesting to see that side of things, and be able to have that kind of network. But I mean, we were also talking much larger dollar amounts, a much larger operation than my little 80 acres now. So it had its advantages and disadvantages. But like now, as a sole proprietor, I've got my 80 acres. Like I said, I'm a solo venturer here. I still have resources. I still have people that I need to work with. In some aspects, it's a little bit easier when it comes to decision making. I sit myself down and I ask myself, "What do you want to do, Jen?" And usually, she doesn't provide a lot of control. Usually, it's, "Jen, should we get more chickens?" Well, of course we should get more chickens, and so it's a lot of my own self, but then there's still other people that I have to kind of bring into, or at least take into consideration. So for example, I have a neighbor down the road who is kind enough to help cover chores for me when I'm gone. Usually it's a couple of my kids that'll help cover chores, but like for example, when we take myself and the kids like actually go somewhere and go do something, we're all gone, then I have to rely on the neighbor down the road. And so they may or may not realize that they're involved in this, but I'm making decisions based on, oh, do I really want to have lambs at the same time that I'm gone? Because then my neighbor down the road who doesn't know anything about sheep but knows a lot about goats, they have to, manage it. So I'm making decisions based on how other people are involved also. There's, my tax accountant is another big one. He's probably learned more about farming than he's ever wanted to know. He knows a lot about the tax side of things, but every time I see him, I'm schooling him on a few more things. He's like, "I didn't realize." I'm like, "Hey, anytime you want to come out and learn more, you let me know." I have a good reputation with a bank. Thankfully, I'm not in a position where I need operating loans. But I still have that good reputable contact with a bank that I do regular business with, so that if and when that need arises and I decide to expand or something, I need an operating loan or, need an expansion loan or something, I have somebody to work with there and that actually knows me and I know them. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm like off the top of my head. And then the other one real quick is some of the other local producers too. And so I like to think that like Jake, I know Jake in a couple different facets actually. And so, keeping that connection, keeping in with those people, Jake and I may not sit down and make decisions about my farm personally, but in some aspects, especially we're part of the same co-op, for example, it's sometimes we can work with each other and be like, you know what, I am really struggling with tomatoes, and oh, Jake is doing phenomenal with tomatoes. Like we start to piggyback and help each other out for the greater good when we look at like a co-op, for example. We've got that good connection with other local producers that we can work together and make sure the whole is getting taken care of. And it ultimately affects each of our own businesses, and we're part of each other's businesses without actually being a part of each other's businesses.
Farming is very much a community-based type of job. Like I've always said it, you can be a sole operator on your farm, but it takes a community to build a farm, and it truly does. And you hit that point home perfectly, Jen. But Carmen, would you like to add anything to this one?
Yeah, always been a sole proprietor, sole operator. So it was me discussing this with myself, what I should do and what I shouldn't do. But about 15 to 20 years ago, my wife and I started thinking about what are we going to do with this farm? Our 4 children had great jobs. They loved the farm, but they weren't going to be farmers. Here I've been doing organic all my life. I don't want to turn this over to a conventional operation. So my business plan became transferring that farm and transitioning out of it. And so I got in touch with a lawyer, and we started talking about how we could do this. And so what we arrived at was a farm limited partnership, whereby we could be giving the farm to the 4 children over time, and then we could retire. But the critical thing was who was going to operate it, because I know I can go on forever, but not really. Luckily enough, a young neighbor, as Luke, came over one day about 10 years ago and said he would like to learn to farm organic. And he said, I'd like you to teach me that. And so he worked with me that 1 year. Didn't want to get paid, didn't want anything. He just wanted to learn how to operate equipment, what's all about rotation, weed management, fertility, all these things. And so at the end of that growing season, I told Luke, I said, I'm going to need somebody to carry on this operation because I can't go on forever. He said, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And so the next year he went and did his own. He had a small operation, 80 acres, and he was transitioning that to organic. So he did that all himself. He'd call me up every once in a while that year and just have a few questions. At the end of the year, he came over and asked if that option was still available to him. And I told him, I said, it certainly is. And the reason I felt comfortable doing this is, first of all, my wife and I had spent a lot of time talking to the lawyer and setting up this whole partnership system. It may not sound important to a 25, 30, 40-year-old, but it is. It's something I think you need to start thinking about right from the beginning. Not that you take actions, but start thinking about it. And don't wait until the day before retirement to make it happen. So I think it fits in this whole business planning idea because things can happen. But anyway, when Luke came over and said he'd like to do that, I said, great. I said, now I need 2 more years to get my head turned around from making decisions to not making decisions, to being in charge to not being in charge. And that may not sound like a big deal, but it is. When you are a sole operator and you're making the day-to-day calls, the decisions, spending the money, whatever, all of a sudden you hand that off. It's a challenge. But I had those 2 years and worked with Luke very closely those 2 years And so we were able to hand that operation over very smoothly. Luke fully understands that he may never be able to buy that farm, but he will be able to operate it. And he and I communicate on all kinds of ideas. In fact, he and I together came up with the business plan for introducing the cow-calf herd into that operation. It's that communication that we talked about, and it really has worked out quite well. And just one other quick piece here. It also provided a very beneficial tax benefit for me because Luke needed equipment. And so I said, Luke, I've got this line of pretty good equipment, state of the art, doing organic, and got myself in a good financial position. Any of this equipment you think you want to buy? And he looked at it and he says, I think so. And so we took a third party and put a value on that equipment. And then Luke could pick out the ones he wanted. And then he and I devised a payment plan on that equipment. It saved me tax liability, and it helped finance him as a beginning farmer. So it all fits into that business planning, but who do you communicate with and how do you communicate with them? So I just wanted to add that quick piece as well.
Yeah, that was perfect. And I love how you brought up succession planning. It is not something that we talk about very much, but it is something that is very important. Regardless if we're the sole operators and we're in our 20s, we definitely got to be thinking about what are our kids going to be taking over this farm? What is the next steps afterwards? When we start getting into our 50s and 60s, that is a conversation that is very seriously on the table. I do know NDSU does run a couple courses through their extension to kind of help mitigate some of those succession planning procedures. And it's definitely something that we want to implement in farms as well, because I have a passion for it. So thank you for bringing that up. That is very important. But since we're getting a little bit low on time, we'll skip to our last question. Business planning, financial planning, record keeping can all be very dense topics and can be difficult to tackle all at once. It takes time to develop these habits, especially if you struggle within one of these subjects. For certified organic producers, these subjects are essential for your business operations. The nice thing is that there are a lot of resources out there to help. You just got to spend a little time kind of digging through them and studying. It may take a lot of time depending on how well you are versed within these topics, but sometimes you just got to study and do some learning. But with that being said, do you guys have any resources, trainings, organizations that have you found helpful during your business planning processes? And Chen, would you like to start?
Yeah, of course I'm going to plug FARRMS in there.
Okay.
So, and like I mentioned before too, I mean, I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for the Farm Beginnings program. But Jake, you'd mentioned there's so many resources and there's a lot of digging. And I am one who I love to get nerdy on things. I love to dig into things, but I very easily fall down rabbit holes and get really, really overwhelmed. And so having a one like very specific organization like FARRMS to be able to go to where they've already dug through a lot of this information. They're already familiar with the resources that are out there, who to connect to or who to give you to. It's a lot easier to contact somebody, like in FARRMS or another organization and be like, hey, here's my dilemma, here's my issue, here's what I need. What do you recommend? Who do you know of? And allow them to direct you. I'm not saying that that's your only resource, but it's been a really good one for myself. I've been involved in FARRMS in multiple different facets and still am. Jake keeps roping me into one thing after another. But everything from the mentorship program, which I've been doing for a number of years. I've done the internship program for like the last 5 years. The Farm Beginnings, there's Farm Dreams, it's like every time I turn around, we've got more programs, more opportunities, more things coming up. And so it's been great. It's been a great resource for me, which is kind of nice because I know there's so much out there. And part of it is I'm like, I don't know if these people are legit. I don't know if this organization's legit. I'll stick to one that I know, where I know that these people are legit because I talk to them on a regular basis and I've worked with them for quite a bit over the years. Um, and so that's a big one for me. And then again, I'll plug it in there is your other local producers. Getting to know and have that connection with your other local producers is huge, especially if you're in any sort of a specialty or niche type area. And what I mean, like, local producers are still great on large scale, but when you're talking, even organic, for example, because you might be a larger organic or a larger farm, but that whole piece of just being organic, not everybody around you is going to be organic, especially, I look around like I'm smack dab in the middle of the valley, like it's all conventional farmland as far as the eye can see where I'm at. And then there's me in my little 80 acres, and it's like, and I'm kind of going against the flow and, fighting against the stream. But getting to know those other local farmers around you that do things similar, or even just the fact that they're smaller scale, they're niche just like you are. Maybe they've run into some of the same issues. I find that I'm not on the same playing field necessarily as some of these conventional farmers who have governmental programs that they qualify for, but I don't because of what I grow or the acreage that I have, but it's like, but some of my fellow, farmers, my fellow producers might know of insurance agencies that do cater to smaller scale, different governmental programs that will cater to smaller scale or to more niche products, things like that. So that has been a huge resource for me.
That was very well said. And I thank you for the plug for farms. I don't think I could have said it any better. But
I will every time, you know it.
absolutely. And that's why I keep inviting you, Jen. But Carmen, do you have any resources off the top of your head?
Yeah, somebody once told me, if you can teach it, you'll know it. You'll understand it. And over the years, keeping these notes, keeping this information, really started to focus me on what were the important records to build on. And obviously, I learned most of those through FinPac, because I could see the enterprise and what it was or wasn't doing, and then correlate that to what I was doing on the farm that made it profitable or not so profitable. So putting all that together, then attending organic conferences where you really have an opportunity to exchange one-on-one and listen to a lot of experts in various areas, what worked and what didn't work for them, successes, failures, and all those things. And then finally, being asked to do a workshop on weed management, on crop rotations, on marketing. So then it really puts you in the driver's seat, and you have to have some credibility in what you're saying and know that what you're telling these people is in fact going to work for them. And then the last piece, and I think it's probably one of the most rewarding for me, is even this last year, right now, I have 3 mentees who I'm working with. And just going and visiting them farms and listening to them, listening to what they have, what their questions are, and then being able to supply them with suggestions or ideas. That just really helps you understand even better what, if I was still farming, what I am doing or what I did do in past years that made it successful. So it all starts, though, with record keeping. There's no better place to start than with the record keeping, because the records will tell the story. They don't lie. And if you take and use those records and work according to them and adjust your operations based on them, you will be successful. So that's as succinct as I guess I can say it.
No, that's perfect. Very well said. I thank you. So we got about 5 minutes left before we close out for the evening. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask the panel? It can be about anything. Feel free to unmute yourself and kind of ask to the panel. Otherwise, you can put it into the chat and I can bring it up. Well, that's okay if there's any questions. There's no questions, that's all right. If you do think of anything, please always feel free to reach out to me. We are always happy to help at FARRMS, and we will definitely get you in contact with the right people to find you those answers. But I wanted to thank you very much, Jen and Carmen, for taking the time out of your busy schedules tonight to answer some of the questions that I have. We all very much appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Great webinar.
Glad to hear it. All right. Just a few housekeeping items before we get out of here for the night. Again, just as a reminder that I will be sending out a recap email of tonight's webinar later this week. This email will contain tonight's recording, along with all of the resources that were mentioned in tonight's webinar, along with more resources that FARRM has compiled throughout our organic webinar series. If you come across any resource that you haven't heard tonight or that you don't see in our recap email, please feel free to reach out to me and share that anytime. I'm always happy to learn more and share more information with our community. In addition to FARRMS running the Farm Beginnings program, like we talked about tonight, to kind of help build that holistic business plan out, we also offer technical assistance to farmers searching for help. If you have any questions about business planning, record keeping, going organic, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Otherwise, there is a TA inquiry form on the FARRMS website. Also, it'll be in the recap email if you want to, just a quick link of it. I want to thank you again all for participating in tonight's webinar and for signing up for the Going Organic webinar series. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening and an amazing week ahead of you. So good night, everyone, and have a good one.